She was fired for her age. Then the company's founder stepped in. Opulent. The word hung heavy in the air of the loom and thread boardroom, a silent testament to generations of meticulous craft and unwavering luxury. Yet the atmosphere within, usually a hushed reverence for the brand's storied legacy, crackled with a different kind of tension this morning. Blaine Montgomery, head of retail operations, misinterpreted it entirely, convinced it was the quiet awe of his subordinates, a silent acknowledgement of his genius. He sat at the polished mahogany table, the wood reflecting the precisely arranged glasses of water and the gleaming brass of the company's ancient crest. A smirk played on his lips, a self-satisfied curve that spoke volumes of his conviction in his unassailable position. He was the future, he believed, and the future was efficient, ruthless, and devoid of sentiment. Across from him, a woman sat patiently, her mere presence seeming to absorb the vibrant light that otherwise filled the room from the grand arched windows overlooking the city. She was impeccably dressed, a sapphire brooch gleaming at her throat, a tiny galaxy of blue against the severe black of her tailored suit. Her silver hair, a luminous cascade, was coiled in a dignified bun, each strand meticulously placed. Genevieve Sterling. The name itself was an echo of the empire they now convened within, its very architect. She looked at Blaine with an intensity that few men her age could muster, let alone a woman of 78. Her eyes, the color of ancient jade, held a depth that belied her quiet demeanor, a history etched into every fine line around them. Yet Blaine saw only a relic, an anomaly in his streamlined vision of corporate efficiency, a piece of outdated machinery he would soon dismantle. And so, Mr. Montgomery, Genevieve's voice, though soft, carried an undeniable resonance, a timbre that cut through the low hum of nervous conversation that had permeated the room moments before. It was a voice that commanded attention without raising its volume. You stand by your recent decisions? Your optimizations? She paused, allowing the word to hang in the air, weighted with a subtle, dangerous irony that Blaine, in his supreme self-regard, entirely missed. He simply nodded, ready to launch into his rehearsed defense. Blaine straightened his silk tie, the movement precise and self-assured. His posture radiated a smug confidence that bordered on arrogance, a theatrical display for the benefit of the other board members. Absolutely, Miss Sterling, he declared, his voice firm, projecting an almost messianic certainty. My strategies have brought unparalleled efficiency to the retail division. We've cut unnecessary overhead, eliminated redundancies. The numbers speak for themselves. He gestured dismissively with a manicured hand, its nails buffed to a high sheen, implying that her antiquated notions held no sway against his modern metrics. He was utterly convinced of his own genius, blind to the true nature of the meeting. He believed this was a mere formality, a polite nod to the past before he could continue his ruthless ascent, his vision of a lean, mean, profitable machine. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through Genevieve's hand as she reached for a delicate porcelain teacup, its surface adorned with a hand-painted sprig of lavender. Her gaze, however, never wavered from Blaine's triumphant face. The small tremor was not of weakness, but of a tightly reined-in emotion. Redundancies, you say? Her voice remained quiet, almost a whisper, but a new, almost predatory glint entered her eyes, a flicker of the formidable intelligence that had once built an empire from a single thread. And by redundancies, you mean people, do you not? Specifically, those whom you deemed slow or technologically challenged. The precise phrasing, the deliberate emphasis, was a subtle prod, testing the limits of his arrogance. Blaine chuckled, a condescending sound that grated against the hushed atmosphere of the room. It was a sound designed to belittle, to dismiss her concerns as sentimental foolishness. With all due respect, Miss Sterling, he began, a patronizing smile playing on his lips, the market demands agility. We cannot afford sentimentality. Employees who cannot keep pace, who resist technological integration, are simply liabilities. It's an unfortunate truth of modern business. We are not a charity after all. He leaned forward, emboldened by what he perceived as his victory, his arguments irrefutable. And frankly, your personal involvement in such trivial matters is quite surprising. This is hardly your domain anymore. The implication was clear, cutting, and intended to sting. She was old, irrelevant, and should concern herself with knitting circles, not a global fashion empire. A slow, knowing smile spread across Genevieve Sterling's face, a smile that sent an unexpected shiver down the spines of the few board members who truly understood the steel beneath her velvet exterior. It was the smile of a cat toying with a mouse, of a master chess player delivering checkmate, the final decisive move that ends the game. She set her teacup down with a faint clink that seemed to echo in the sudden, absolute silence of the room, each note a pronouncement. "Oh, but it is my domain, Mr. Montgomery," she stated, her voice now firm, authoritative, the gentle veneer finally cracking to reveal the formidable founder. Her eyes, piercing and cold, locked onto his. "And your game, I'm afraid, is over." Blaine's smug expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then a rapidly dawning horror. His carefully constructed facade of confidence crumbled. He glanced around the table, seeking an explanation, a lifeline, but found only the grave, knowing faces of the board members. They understood now the true import of the woman's words, the magnitude of the trap he had blithely stumbled into. He had walked right into a meticulously laid snare, fashioned by the very hand that had built everything around him. He had no idea the depths of the deception, nor the magnitude of the consequences about to crash down upon his meticulously curated life. Genevieve Sterling had not merely built loom and thread. She had imbued it with her very soul. From a small artisanal textile workshop tucked away in a bustling corner of London, she had nurtured it into a global powerhouse, a name synonymous with elegance, quality, and most importantly, ethical production. In the early days, she had known every weaver by name, understood the intricate dance of threads on the loom, and personally selected every bolt of raw silk. Her philosophy, honed over decades, had been simple and unwavering. Invest in people, and they will invest in your vision. She had fostered a culture of respect, valuing experience and dedication as much as innovation. Apprenticeships were common, long-term careers the norm, and the company's reputation for fairness and employee loyalty was legendary within the industry. It was more than a business, it was a community, a thriving ecosystem built on mutual respect. But in her retirement, as the company passed through layers of corporate management and successive CEOs, the gentle hum of loom and thread began to change. Whispers, faint at first, began to reach her secluded country estate, carried by concerned former employees or discreet reports from loyalists who still held positions within the company's old guard. Rumors of aggressive cost-cutting, of a ruthless new corporate culture that prioritized profit margins over human dignity, and most disturbingly, of a pervasive ageism creeping into the hiring and firing practices. New, sleek, and often soulless offices sprang up, replacing the comfortable, character-filled workspaces she had so carefully designed. Genevieve had dismissed them at first, unwilling to believe that her legacy, built on compassion and quality, could be so easily eroded. She attributed it to the natural anxieties of change, the occasional growing pains of a large corporation. But the whispers grew louder, evolving into concrete reports delivered in hushed tones by her longtime assistant, Eleanor Vance, or tucked discreetly into the quarterly financials. Long-term employees, veterans with invaluable institutional knowledge, the very people who understood the delicate nuances of loom and thread's unique fabrics and intricate supply chains, were being pushed out. Younger, cheaper, less experienced staff were being brought in, often ill-equipped for the intricacies of the textile and fashion industry. Quality control began to slip, product lines became more generic, and the distinctive loom and thread signature began to fade. The company, once a beacon of fairness and artistic integrity, was becoming just another faceless corporation, driven by short-sighted metrics and the relentless pursuit of the next percentage point of profit. The catalyst for her drastic plan arrived during a particularly cold winter evening, the wind howling around her ancient stone manor, rattling the window panes. Genevieve sat by the roaring fireplace, its flames casting dancing shadows across the mahogany desk, as she reviewed the latest quarterly report. It was a grim testament to the company's new direction, filled with the sterile language of corporate efficiency. She noticed a significant drop in employee retention, an alarming increase in restructuring costs, and vague mentions of workforce optimization. Her eyes scanned the document, pausing on the name of the head of retail operations, Blaine Montgomery. His name had appeared frequently in the disparaging reports, always associated with aggressive targets and a relentless drive for efficiency. It was said he viewed older employees not as experienced assets, but as burdensome liabilities, their wisdom eclipsed by their perceived slowness, their very presence an impediment to his vision of a lean, agile workforce. A profound sense of disillusionment settled over Genevieve, a cold weight in her chest. How could her life's work, her very essence poured into every stitch and thread, be so distorted? She had poured her heart and soul into loom and thread, building it brick by brick, thread by thread. It was more than a company, it was a family, a community, and now it was being hollowed out from within, its soul slowly extracted for the sake of abstract numbers. She couldn't simply rely on reports or second-hand accounts. She needed to see it for herself, to experience the callousness firsthand. She needed to walk the halls of her own empire as an outsider, a ghost witnessing its decline, a living testament to its forgotten values. The idea, audacious and seemingly insane, sparked in her mind, a sudden brilliant flash in the encroaching darkness. She would re-enter loom and thread, not as its revered founder, but as its most vulnerable target. She would become a cautionary tale, a living embodiment of everything the new regime sought to eliminate. The plan began to take shape with meticulous precision, a testament to the strategic mind that had built her empire, honed by decades of navigating complex markets and human frailties. First, the disguise. Genevieve Sterling, known for her sharp intellect, her even sharper sartorial sense, and her commanding presence, had to vanish entirely. In her place, Agnes Finch would emerge. Agnes would be an unassuming, seemingly frail elderly woman, her posture slightly stooped, her movements a little slower, her silver hair, once lustrous, transformed into a wispy gray, devoid of its former vibrancy. Her clothes would be modest, well-worn but meticulously clean, speaking of a life lived on a limited income, of careful budgeting and thrift. Genevieve even practiced a subtle tremor in her hands, a slight hesitation in her speech, and a perpetually bewildered expression when faced with modern technology, a perfect mimicry of the very traits Blaine sought to eradicate. She spent weeks studying the mannerisms of elderly individuals struggling with daily tasks, observing their gait, their expressions of confusion, ensuring every detail was authentic, every hesitation perfectly feigned. Next, the backstory for Agnes. She would be a widow, her savings depleted by her late husband's medical bills, forced back into the workforce out of sheer financial desperation. She would feign a complete lack of modern tech skills, emphasizing her reliance on old-world methods and manual labor, a perfect antithesis to Blaine Montgomery's technological zeal. This persona would make her the ideal victim, a clear example of the type of employee Blaine relentlessly sought to purge from the system. It was a narrative designed to exploit his prejudices, to draw out his inherent cruelty. Genevieve then quietly established a series of shell corporations and trusts, meticulously moving her vast personal wealth into untouchable accounts, ensuring that her financial standing as Agnes Finch would appear exactly as she needed it to be: dire, bordering on destitution. She even rented a small, modest apartment in a less affluent part of the city, truly immersing herself in the world Agnes would inhabit. She sold her luxurious car, bought a sensible, used sedan, and even began taking public transport, observing the subtle nuances of daily life for ordinary citizens, the casual struggles, the quiet dignities. It was a humbling, eye-opening experience, even for a woman who had come from humble beginnings. Her closest confidant, her longtime personal assistant and legal counsel, Eleanor Vance, was initially horrified. "Genevieve, this is madness," Eleanor had pleaded, her voice a mixture of fear and exasperation, pacing Genevieve's study. You risk everything. Your health, your reputation. This could genuinely harm you. But Genevieve's resolve was ironclad. My reputation means nothing if the soul of my company is lost, Eleanor. I need to know the truth firsthand. I need to see if the kindness I built into its foundation has been utterly extinguished. And if it has, Genevieve's eyes hardened, a flash of the formidable woman she truly was, then I will reclaim it, no matter the cost. Eleanor, seeing the unshakable determination in her employer's gaze, the quiet, almost spiritual conviction, reluctantly agreed, swearing herself to absolute secrecy, ready to act on Genevieve's signal, however dangerous the venture might be. Genevieve Sterling, the visionary matriarch, had become Agnes Finch, the unassuming applicant. She was ready to face the insidious rot that had taken root in her beloved company, ready to become its scapegoat, its forgotten elder, all to expose the truth and reclaim the ethical compass of loom and thread. She knew the path would be difficult, humiliating even, but the prospect of witnessing the erosion of her legacy, the destruction of everything she had built with love and care, was far more painful than any personal indignity she might endure. The irony was palpable. The founder herself, reduced to feigning destitution, to expose the greed and short-sightedness of those who now held the reins of her empire. She was walking into the lion's den, disguised as the weakest prey, and the lions, utterly unaware, were about to reveal their true ravenous nature. Agnes Finch's journey into the heart of loom and thread began with the most mundane of tasks, filling out an online application. It was a test of her acting skills from the very first click. Genevieve, with deliberate clumsiness, navigated the digital forms, feigning frustration and requiring assistance from a patient young man at a public library computer, his brow furrowed in earnest attempts to help her with what seemed like insurmountable technical hurdles. She submitted her application for a retail associate position, listing minimal experience beyond decades ago in a small local craft store, and emphasizing her strong work ethic and willingness to learn new things, while discreetly hinting at her age-related tech struggles. Every hesitant click, every murmured apology for her perceived slowness, was a carefully orchestrated performance. The interview was with Blaine Montgomery himself, a meticulously groomed man whose sharp suit seemed to barely contain his restless ambition. His office was a testament to his modern, minimalist aesthetic. Stark white walls, a single abstract painting, and a large gleaming glass desk that offered no warmth or personal touch. He sat behind it, scrolling through a tablet, barely making eye contact when Agnes entered his office. His initial reaction upon seeing the slightly stooped, conservatively dressed Agnes was a barely concealed sigh of exasperation. His eyes, cold and calculating, scanned her resume for a mere second before dismissing it as irrelevant. He saw only her age, a statistic he intended to eliminate, a problem to be solved with an algorithm. Agnes Finch, is it? Blaine's voice was curt, devoid of warmth, a precise, clipped tone that conveyed impatience. You're applying for a retail associate position at Loom and Thread. You understand this involves modern POS systems, inventory management software, online order fulfillment. Digital proficiency is paramount. He spoke slowly, articulating each word with exaggerated clarity, as if addressing a child, making no effort to hide his incredulity, his disdain almost palpable. Agnes, playing her role to perfection, offered a nervous, wavering smile, her gaze earnest and a little lost. Oh yes, sir. I understand. I'm a quick learner, always have been. And I'm very good with people, you see. I believe in a personal touch. And I'm not afraid of hard work, I assure you. She wrung her hands slightly, a gesture of feigned desperation, her voice a little breathy. She knew Blaine was scrutinizing her, weighing her perceived cost versus her almost non-existent benefit in his cold, calculating ledger. He was looking for any excuse to dismiss her, to stamp her application with a resounding no. Blaine leaned back, a sneer twisting his lips, a look of profound skepticism etched on his face. Quick learner? At your age? Look, Miss Finch, we're a fast-paced environment. We're not looking for personal touches as much as efficient transactions. And frankly, your resume, it's a bit thin on recent experience in this sector. Why loom and thread of all places? And why now? He was baiting her, hoping she'd stumble, confirm his biases, give him the perfect reason to show her the door. Well, Agnes began, her voice a little tremulous, drawing upon the crafted narrative. After my husband passed, things have been difficult. My pension is small, and with the cost of living, I just need something to make ends meet. I saw your company, Loom and Thread, and thought, what a fine, reputable company. And I've always admired your fabrics, you see. Quality, truly. Genevieve laid it on thick, the financial desperation almost palpable, the admiration for the company a subtle, almost imperceptible jab at his current disregard for its true values. Blaine, predictably, scoffed inwardly at the mention of her personal plight, seeing it as weakness, not a legitimate reason for employment. He saw only an opportunity. To Genevieve's internal amusement, Blaine hired her. Not out of compassion, for he possessed none, but out of a calculated, cynical move. He saw Agnes as a perfect example to parade, a living case study for his superiors, demonstrating the challenges he faced in his streamlining efforts. He planned to hire her, document her inevitable failures, meticulously record her perceived inefficiencies, and then fire her as a prime example of the inefficiency of older staff. He would then present her dismissal as irrefutable proof of concept for his ageist policies, a sacrificial lamb on the altar of his ambition. It was a cruel plan, perfectly suited to his character, but one Genevieve had anticipated, even counted on. He was digging his own grave, and she merely provided the shovel. Agnes's first few days were a blur of deliberate incompetence and escalating humiliation. Blaine immediately assigned her to tasks designed to highlight her perceived limitations, to expose her as a burden to his efficient system. She was put on the oldest, slowest cash register, one that frequently jammed and required manual override, a relic in itself. She was instructed to handle all returns manually, filling out lengthy paper forms instead of using the streamlined digital process. She was repeatedly lectured on the speed of transactions, the importance of minimizing customer wait times. Faster, Agnes. The line is growing. Do you not understand how this works? He would bark, his voice echoing through the store, loud enough for other customers and employees to hear, ensuring her public humiliation. He deliberately gave her an outdated tablet for inventory, knowing it would freeze and crash mid-task, then publicly chastised her for the resulting errors, for the incompetence that led to stock discrepancies. The younger staff, mostly in their 20s, avoided her like a contagious illness. They saw her as a burden, a walking monument to obsolescence, an inconvenient impediment to their own fast-paced routines. They whispered behind their hands, rolled their eyes when she fumbled with a new process, and offered no help, even when Agnes visibly struggled to lift heavy bolts of fabric onto high shelves, her small frame straining under the weight. Her back ached, her hands trembled, but Genevieve maintained her composure, enduring the physical discomfort and the emotional sting of their indifference, their casual cruelty. She watched, observed, and catalogued every slight, every dismissive glance, every cruel word. This was the rot she had come to witness, festering in the heart of her company. It was amidst this sea of apathy, this chilling indifference, that a small island of kindness emerged. Evelyn Price, a young woman in her early 20s, worked diligently in the stockroom, perpetually looking tired but possessing eyes that held an innate, unforced kindness. Evelyn was quiet, unassuming, much like Agnes herself, blending into the background, doing her work without complaint. She was often assigned the most arduous tasks, paid barely enough to cover rent and groceries, and seemed to carry the weight of the world on her slender shoulders, a quiet burden of responsibility. Yet she noticed. She saw Agnes, truly saw her, not as an inconvenient obstacle but as a person. One particularly demanding day, Blaine had assigned Agnes the task of reorganizing an entire section of bolts of fabric in the back, a task that required considerable strength and agility, far beyond what he knew she could manage. Agnes, feigning exhaustion and clumsiness, deliberately dropped a particularly heavy roll of silk brocade. It landed with a thud, narrowly missing her foot. Blaine, passing by, merely scowled, his face contorted in disgust. "Careful, Agnes. That's company property. Try not to break anything else." He walked away, his words sharp, leaving her to struggle alone with the heavy roll, her feigned despair palpable. Evelyn, who had been silently pushing a heavy trolley of shipping boxes nearby, paused, her brow furrowed with concern. She hesitated for a moment, glancing around to ensure no one else was watching, then without a word, came over and effortlessly lifted the bolt, placing it back on the shelf as if it weighed nothing. She then quietly, almost shyly, offered, "Here, Agnes. Let me help you with these. They're heavier than they look." Her voice was soft, devoid of condescension, a gentle ripple in the harsh air. She then proceeded to help Agnes lift several more, working quickly and efficiently, never making Agnes feel like a burden, simply a colleague needing a hand. Later that week, during a particularly grueling shift where Blaine had denied Agnes her lunch break, forcing her to work through it, Evelyn noticed Agnes's slumped posture and pale face. Agnes had been assigned to clean a particularly stubborn stain off the display window, her hands aching from the repetitive scrubbing, her stomach rumbling with genuine hunger. As the other employees dispersed for their breaks, heading to the staff room for hurried meals and phone scrolling, Evelyn approached Agnes, a small brown paper bag clutched in her hand. "Here," Evelyn said, her voice barely a whisper, glancing around to ensure Blaine wasn't nearby, her movements swift and discreet. "I packed a little extra today. My mom always makes too much." Inside were 2 humble sandwiches and a crisp apple, a simple but profound offering. It was a simple gesture, yet to Genevieve, it was a beacon in the oppressive darkness, a flicker of warmth in the icy corporate indifference. Agnes's eyes, genuinely surprised, looked up at Evelyn's earnest, tired face. "Oh dear, I couldn't possibly," Agnes began, her feigned protest mixing with a genuine wave of emotion. "Please," Evelyn insisted gently, her gaze sincere. "You look like you need it. We're all in this together, aren't we?" She offered a faint, hopeful smile, a rare glimpse of genuine connection in the transactional world of loom and thread. Genevieve, as Agnes, felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the sandwich. This young woman, clearly struggling herself, living paycheck to paycheck, supporting her family, still found it within her to offer compassion. It was a stark contrast to Blaine's icy indifference, a testament to the enduring human spirit, a quiet rebellion against the system. The cruelty from Blaine only escalated. He would routinely assign Agnes conflicting tasks, then blame her for not completing either. He would make her stand for hours, even when her joints ached and her feet swelled, refusing her a stool, citing company policy. He once made her count thousands of buttons by hand, rather than use the automated counter, a deliberately tedious and inefficient task, then berated her for the time it took, for her antiquated methods. "This is what happens when you insist on doing things the old-fashioned way, Agnes. We live in the 21st century," he had declared triumphantly, enjoying her apparent struggle, enjoying the spectacle of her humiliation. He saw her as a puppet, dancing to his cruel tune. Agnes internally felt a quiet, almost serene satisfaction. Blaine was meticulously building her case for her, brick by painstaking brick. Each act of cruelty, each public humiliation, was a documented piece of evidence, a foundation for his own downfall. She had secretly installed tiny, discreet audio recorders in her clothing, capturing every one of Blaine's callous remarks, every condescending tone, every explicit or thinly veiled ageist comment. Her feigned struggles with technology were a perfect cover. Who would suspect an elderly, technologically inept woman of recording anything, let alone planning a corporate coup? Evelyn, however, remained Agnes's quiet solace, her small, consistent acts of kindness a lifeline in the relentless barrage of Blaine's cruelty. She would leave small, encouraging notes in Agnes's locker, often just a simple "hang in there" or "you're doing great." She would discreetly show Agnes shortcuts on the POS system, pretending to be helping herself, guiding Agnes's fumbling fingers with gentle patience. She even shared stories of her own struggles, her younger siblings she was helping put through school, her single mother working 2 jobs, the constant juggle of bills and responsibilities, fostering a quiet, unspoken bond of empathy and shared experience. Evelyn never asked for anything in return, her kindness purely altruistic, a pure, unblemished reflection of her character. She simply understood what it felt like to be overlooked, undervalued, and struggling in a system that seemed designed to keep one down. Then came the inevitable, the final act in Blaine's carefully orchestrated charade of incompetence. One particularly busy Saturday, the store was bustling, lines stretching long at every register. Blaine assigned Agnes to the most temperamental POS terminal, one notorious for freezing and crashing mid-transaction, a machine that even the younger, tech-savvy employees dreaded. He then gave her a sales quota that was laughably high for any employee, let alone someone struggling with an old system and feigned inefficiency. Predictably, the system crashed mid-transaction, causing a long line to snarl and frustrated customers to murmur impatiently. Blaine, who had been hovering nearby, enjoying the impending chaos, stormed over, his face a mask of feigned outrage, his voice booming for all to hear. "Agnes, what is the meaning of this? You've held up the entire line. This is utterly unacceptable," he bellowed, ensuring everyone in the vicinity, customers and employees alike, could hear his pronouncement. "Your lack of technological adaptability, your slow pace, your inability to keep up with the demands of a modern retail environment, it's causing significant financial losses for this company." He paused, relishing the moment, a cruel glint in his eyes, his chest puffed out in self-satisfaction. "I'm afraid, Agnes, this isn't working out. Your employment at Loom and Thread is terminated, effective immediately. Collect your things. Security will escort you out." He watched, triumphant, as Agnes's shoulders slumped, her head bowed in what appeared to be profound resignation and despair. He thought he had won, that he had successfully purged another relic from his streamlined, future-forward empire. He had no idea that the old woman he had so gleefully fired was silently, almost imperceptibly, activating a small, discreet device in her pocket, sending an encrypted signal to Eleanor Vance. The game was indeed over, but not in the way Blaine Montgomery envisioned. The curtain was about to rise on the final, devastating act, and he was merely a pawn about to be swept off the board. The setting was the annual Loom and Thread stakeholders meeting, an event held in the grand auditorium of the company's corporate headquarters. The air hummed with nervous anticipation, a restless energy that often preceded major financial announcements. Blaine Montgomery, though still outwardly confident, felt a slight, uncharacteristic unease fluttering beneath his composure. The sudden, unannounced presence of Genevieve Sterling at the main board meeting a few days prior had rattled him, as had the vaguely ominous, unreadable words she had uttered. But he quickly dismissed it, convincing himself it was merely an old woman's final futile attempt to exert influence, a desperate gasp from a bygone era. Today he was scheduled to present his quarterly report, boasting about the efficiencies and cost savings he had achieved, particularly in the retail division. He clutched his notes, a triumphant smile ready to be unleashed upon the eager faces of the investors. The auditorium, a cavernous space with tiered seating, was filled to capacity with investors, department heads, and key personnel, a sea of expectant faces. The stage was set with a large screen displaying the Loom and Thread logo, its elegant design a stark contrast to the modern sterile atmosphere Blaine had cultivated. As the CEO, a bland corporate figurehead named Mr. Thompson, began his opening remarks, his voice droning with practiced platitudes, a subtle stir rippled through the back of the room. The heavy double door swung open with a soft sigh, and all eyes, drawn by the unexpected interruption, turned. Genevieve Sterling entered, not as the unassuming Agnes Finch, but as the formidable founder she truly was. She wore a bespoke suit of deep sapphire blue, its fabric shimmering with the quality loom and thread was once known for, a testament to true craftsmanship. Her silver hair, now vibrant and alive, was meticulously styled, framing a face that was sharp, alert, and radiating an undeniable power, a quiet force that commanded immediate respect. She walked with a confident stride, utterly devoid of the stoop Agnes had adopted, her posture regal and unyielding. Beside her, Eleanor Vance, her sharp-suited legal counsel, walked with grim determination, carrying a discreet, slim briefcase, its contents poised to unravel a career. A collective gasp went through the room, a wave of stunned recognition. Some recognized her instantly, a legendary figure from the company's past, a matriarch returned from the corporate wilderness. Others, newer employees who had only heard whispers of the founder, exchanged bewildered glances, wondering who this regal, uninvited guest could be. Blaine Montgomery, mid-whisper to a colleague about the brilliance of his upcoming presentation, froze. His jaw went slack, his eyes widened, his face draining of all color, turning a ghastly white. The woman who now commanded the room with her mere presence was not the frail old lady he had dismissed. She was a titan, a force of nature. There was a terrifying familiarity in her eyes, a piercing recognition that sent a jolt of ice through his veins, a cold wave of dread that began to crystallize into horror. Genevieve walked directly to the front, past the stunned CEO, who had stopped speaking mid-sentence, his mouth agape. She took center stage, the microphone, almost as if waiting for her, seemed to hum in anticipation of her voice. She looked out at the sea of faces, her gaze sweeping over them, finally resting on Blaine Montgomery, who now sat rigid in his seat, his earlier smugness completely obliterated by dawning terror. His hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles were white. "Good morning, everyone." Genevieve's voice resonated through the auditorium, clear and strong, commanding immediate, absolute attention. "Some of you may know me. For those who don't, my name is Genevieve Sterling. I am the founder of Loom and Thread." A wave of murmurs and whispers swept through the room, a rising tide of disbelief and anticipation. The newer employees exchanged bewildered glances. The older ones sat up straighter, a mix of awe and trepidation on their faces, sensing the seismic shift about to occur. "I founded this company on principles of integrity, quality, and respect for every individual who contributed to its success," she continued, her voice gaining an edge of steel, a quiet fury simmering beneath the calm surface. "It was built on the belief that a company's true value lies not just in its profits, but in its people. Sadly, it appears those principles have been forgotten." Her gaze lingered on Mr. Thompson, the current CEO, a silent indictment. She paused, allowing her words to sink into the stunned silence, for their full weight to be absorbed. Blaine shifted uncomfortably, his mind racing, desperately trying to connect the scattered dots. But the pieces refused to form a coherent, rational picture. He knew he was in trouble, deep, irreparable trouble, but he couldn't grasp the extent of it, the horrifying irony that was about to be revealed. "For the past several months," Genevieve announced, her eyes now fixed on Blaine's pale, sweat-slicked face, an almost surgical precision in her gaze, "I have been conducting a personal audit of this company's retail operations. Not from the comfort of a boardroom, filled with sanitized reports, but from the ground floor. From the very trenches where our customers interact with our brand, and where our employees face the daily realities of their work." Her words hung heavy in the air, each one a hammer blow. A few people started to exchange looks, a flicker of understanding beginning to cross their faces, a dawning realization that something extraordinary was unfolding. Blaine, however, remained utterly bewildered, a deer caught in headlights, his mind scrambling for an explanation, any explanation, other than the one that was about to shatter his world. "You see," Genevieve continued, a faint sardonic smile touching her lips, a grim satisfaction in her eyes, "I needed to understand firsthand the truth behind the rumors of a new ruthless corporate culture. I needed to see for myself the impact of the streamlining efforts, the efficiency drives, and the pervasive ageism that has, apparently, become an acceptable practice within these walls." She gestured around the room, encompassing the entire corporation, the silent complicity of those who had allowed it to fester. Then she turned directly to Blaine Montgomery, her voice dropping to a chillingly precise tone, a voice that brooked no argument, offered no quarter. And to do that, Mr. Montgomery, I decided to apply for a job. A low-paying, entry-level retail associate position. I feigned financial desperation, a complete lack of modern tech skills, and a general frailty. Became Agnes Finch. The revelation hit Blaine like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole his breath. His jaw dropped, his eyes bulging in utter disbelief, a strangled sound escaping his throat. Agnes Finch, he stammered, the name a foreign, horrifying echo on his tongue, a nightmare come to life. He remembered the stooped posture, the trembling hands, the exasperating slowness, the perpetually bewildered expression, the perfect, infuriating target of his managerial cruelty. The realization slammed into him with the force of a tidal wave. Every harsh word, every humiliating task, every sneering dismissal had been aimed directly at the company's founder. His face contorted, a mixture of shock, terror, and dawning humiliation so profound it was almost visible. He looked as though he might vomit, might simply evaporate from the sheer, crushing weight of his monumental error. A ripple of astonishment spread through the audience, like an electric current. Gasps, whispers, and outright exclamations erupted, a crescendo of shock. Evelyn Price, who had been sitting quietly in the back rows, attending the meeting as a representative from the stockroom, clapped a hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with utter disbelief, tears pricking at their corners. Agnes, the kind, struggling old woman she had befriended, was Genevieve Sterling? The legendary founder? It was an unimaginable truth, a twist of fate so fantastical it defied belief. Genevieve allowed the shock to reverberate, to sink into the collective consciousness, then raised a hand for silence, her gesture absolute. During my time as Agnes Finch, she continued, her voice now filled with a cold fury, a righteous indignation that vibrated through the room, I was subjected to precisely the kind of callous, ageist treatment that has become endemic under the leadership of Mr. Montgomery. She nodded towards Blaine, who now looked like a condemned man, shrunken in his seat, utterly broken. I was given impossible tasks, publicly humiliated, denied breaks, and ultimately fired. Explicitly for my lack of technological adaptability and slow pace, thinly veiled excuses for my age, for my very existence. Eleanor Vance, without a word, a picture of professional calm, stepped forward and placed a small audio recorder on the podium. Genevieve pressed a button. A clear, unmistakable voice, amplified for all to hear, filled the auditorium. Blaine Montgomery's. Faster, Agnes. The line is growing. Do you not understand how this works? Careful, Agnes. That's company property. Try not to break anything else. This is what happens when you insist on doing things the old-fashioned way, Agnes. We live in the 21st century. The recording continued, playing fragments of Blaine's cruelest, most condescending remarks, his dismissive snorts, his patronizing tones, culminating in the triumphant, dismissive declaration of his firing Agnes. Your lack of technological adaptability, your slow pace, your inability to keep up with the demands of a modern retail environment. It's causing significant financial losses for this company. Your employment at Loom and Thread is terminated, effective immediately. Collect your things. Security will escort you out. The silence that followed the recording was deafening, heavier than any sound. A vacuum filled only with the weight of absolute truth. The evidence was irrefutable, damning. Blaine Montgomery slumped further in his chair, his face chalk-white, eyes darting frantically, desperately, as if seeking an escape route through the very walls. His meticulous plans, his carefully constructed career, his entire future were crumbling around him, exposed by the very person he had sought to destroy. He was ruined. Genevieve Sterling looked at him, her expression devoid of pity, a quiet, resolute power radiating from her. "Mr. Montgomery," she declared, her voice ringing with the unshakable authority of the true power in the room, "you have systematically dismantled the very foundation of this company's values. You have fostered a culture of fear, ageism, and inhumanity. And for that, I assure you, there will be consequences." The CEO, Mr. Thompson, who had been standing speechless, his face a mask of shock and burgeoning panic, finally found his voice, albeit a shaky one. "Genevieve. Miss Sterling. I assure you we had no idea." Genevieve turned to him, her gaze equally piercing, dismissing his weak protest with a single look. "No idea, Mr. Thompson? Or simply chose to ignore it for the sake of your numbers?" Her questions hung in the air, a profound indictment not just of Blaine, but of the entire complicit corporate structure, the culture that had allowed such rot to flourish. The mask had fallen and the truth, raw and undeniable, was laid bare for all to see. The retribution, Genevieve knew, had only just begun. The aftermath of Genevieve Sterling's dramatic reveal was nothing short of a corporate earthquake that sent shockwaves throughout Loom and Thread, reverberating far beyond its polished headquarters, shaking the very foundations of the company. Blaine Montgomery's carefully constructed world, built on ruthless ambition and calculated cruelty, imploded within moments of the microphone being silenced. The CEO, Mr. Thompson, his face still pale with shock and mortification, immediately announced Blaine's suspension, a mere formality before the inevitable termination. Security personnel, already alerted by Eleanor Vance, discreetly and efficiently escorted a dazed and trembling Blaine from the auditorium. As he was led away, his eyes darted frantically, trying to meet the gaze of anyone he knew, perhaps for a flicker of sympathy, for a shred of understanding, but found only condemnation and disgust. The few colleagues who had been his allies now turned their backs, distancing themselves from the toxic fallout, their loyalty evaporating like smoke. His cries of protest, of misunderstanding, were drowned out by the murmur of the crowd. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity within Loom and Thread. Genevieve Sterling, with Eleanor Vance by her side, moved swiftly and decisively, a force of nature reclaiming her domain. A comprehensive internal investigation was launched, not just into Blaine Montgomery's actions, but into the entire corporate culture that had allowed such practices to flourish. The audio recordings from Agnes Finch's undercover period, coupled with testimonies from other employees who now felt safe enough, emboldened enough to speak out, painted a damning picture of systemic ageism, bullying, and a complete disregard for employee well-being. Whispers of long-held grievances, of quiet suffering, now erupted into open accounts of mistreatment. Blaine Montgomery was not just fired, he was publicly disgraced. The news of the Loom and Thread founder going undercover as an elderly employee to expose ageism became a viral sensation, picked up by major news outlets globally. A headline splashed across every digital platform. Blaine's name became synonymous with corporate cruelty, a byword for unbridled ambition. His professional reputation was utterly destroyed, irrevocably tainted. Headhunters who had once courted him, offering lucrative positions and promising glittering careers, now scrubbed his name from their lists, eager to avoid any association with his toxic brand. Future employment in any reputable company, especially in a leadership role, became an impossibility. Furthermore, Genevieve's legal team, led by Eleanor, initiated proceedings against him, not just for wrongful termination, but for a pattern of discriminatory practices that had caused emotional distress and financial harm to multiple employees. He lost everything: his lucrative salary, his company car, his privileged position, and with it, his very identity, his sense of self-worth tied so inextricably to his corporate standing. He who had prided himself on his ruthless efficiency, on his ability to cut away the dead weight, was now utterly inefficient, a pariah, an outcast in the corporate world he had so desperately sought to conquer. Meanwhile, in the midst of this corporate upheaval, Evelyn Price found herself in a state of bewildered shock. She had returned to work the day after the meeting, her mind still reeling from the revelation. Agnes Finch, the gentle, struggling old woman she had befriended, was the legendary Genevieve Sterling, the founder of Loom and Thread. It was a truth so fantastical it seemed plucked from the pages of a novel, a fairy tale come to life. Evelyn had barely processed this when she received a summons to the executive offices. Her heart pounded as she walked down the plush corridors, her imagination running wild, fearing she might be reprimanded for some perceived infraction, or perhaps even let go amidst the turmoil, deemed surplus to requirements. She found herself ushered into Genevieve Sterling's temporary office, a room that exuded a quiet power, yet felt surprisingly warm. Genevieve sat behind a large antique wooden desk, her expression kind, yet serious, her eyes holding a deep, knowing twinkle. Eleanor Vance sat beside her, a professional, reassuring presence, offering a small, encouraging smile. "Evelyn, please have a seat," Genevieve said, her voice warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the boardroom authority she had wielded just days prior. "I wanted to speak with you personally." Evelyn, still nervous, perched on the edge of the elegant chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Miss Sterling, I can't believe it. Agnes," she stammered, still trying to reconcile the two identities, the two vastly different worlds they represented. Genevieve smiled gently, a look of profound gratitude in her eyes. "Agnes was a necessary disguise, Evelyn, but it allowed me to see true character. And yours, my dear, shone brightly in the darkest corners of this company, a beacon in the gloom." Her eyes held a deep, heartfelt appreciation. "I witnessed your kindness, your compassion, your willingness to help someone who was struggling, even when you yourself faced hardship. You shared your lunch, you offered encouragement, you discreetly helped me with tasks when no one else would. You did it without expectation of reward, purely out of empathy, out of the goodness of your heart." Evelyn blushed, overwhelmed by the unexpected praise, tears welling in her eyes. I just felt bad for her. For Agnes. She seemed so lost, and Mr. Montgomery was so cruel." Genevieve nodded gravely. "Indeed he was, and that cruelty will be addressed. But your kindness, Evelyn, is a rare and precious commodity in this world, especially in a corporate environment that had become so cold, so transactional. It is precisely the spirit that Loom and Thread was founded upon, and the spirit I intend to restore." She leaned forward, her gaze softening, an almost maternal warmth in her expression. "Evelyn, I am offering you a new position. Effective immediately, you will be the assistant manager of retail operations. This will be a training role, of course, as you learn the ropes of management, but you will be directly mentored by myself and other senior executives who share my vision for an ethical, people-first company. This comes with a substantial salary increase, comprehensive benefits, and opportunities for advanced education, should you choose to pursue them, all fully funded by the company." Evelyn's eyes widened, tears now freely streaming down her face, glistening on her cheeks. Assistant manager? It was a dream, a position she never dared to imagine, let alone achieve with her limited education and humble background. Her current wages barely covered her family's needs, her future a constant worry. This was an astronomical leap, a lifeline thrown from an unexpected shore. "Miss Sterling, I don't know what to say. I'm just a stockroom assistant. I don't have the experience." "You are a kind, empathetic, and intelligent young woman, Evelyn," Genevieve corrected gently, her voice firm, unwavering. "And that, to me, is far more valuable than any fancy degree or years of corporate climbing that might have hardened your heart. I believe you have the integrity and the inherent goodness to help us rebuild the heart of Loom and Thread. This is not just a job offer, Evelyn. It is an investment in the kind of future I want for my company, and for all who work here. It is an investment in human decency." Evelyn could only nod, tears now freely streaming down her face, her chest heaving with emotion. She was receiving not just a job but a lifeline, a chance to lift her family out of poverty, a path to a future she had only ever dreamed of in the quiet solitude of the stockroom, amidst the heavy bolts of fabric. The universe, in its intricate and often ironic way, had delivered an unexpected and boundless reward for a simple, selfless act of human kindness. She, who had nothing to give but compassion, had just been given everything. Months passed. The initial shockwaves subsided, leaving behind a profound transformation at Loom and Thread. Genevieve Sterling, though still technically retired, had effectively resumed control, acting as a guiding hand, overseeing a complete overhaul of the company's corporate culture. The ruthless pursuit of profit at the expense of people was replaced by a renewed, fervent focus on ethical practices, employee well-being, and sustainable production. Workshops on compassionate leadership, diversity, and inclusion were implemented throughout every department. Employees who had been pushed out due to age or perceived inefficiency were invited back, their invaluable experience now valued as a precious asset, their wisdom sought after once more. The company, once teetering on the brink of losing its very soul, was slowly, meticulously, regaining its moral compass, stitch by painstaking stitch. Genevieve felt a profound sense of peace. The indignity she had endured as Agnes Finch, the moments of physical discomfort and emotional sting, were a small price to pay for the reclamation of her legacy, for breathing life back into the company she so dearly loved. She found immense satisfaction in mentoring Evelyn Price, watching the young woman blossom in her new role. Evelyn, initially overwhelmed by the sudden leap in responsibility, quickly adapted to the challenges of management. Her innate empathy made her a natural leader, fostering a supportive, nurturing environment for her team, a stark contrast to Blaine's reign of terror. She approached every task with diligence and a quiet determination, proving Genevieve's faith in her was not misplaced. Evelyn, with the financial security and educational opportunities provided by Genevieve, moved her family into a more comfortable home, a place of stability and hope. Her younger siblings were now thriving in better schools, their futures brighter, and her mother, relieved of the burden of working multiple demanding jobs, found a more fulfilling, less strenuous role within the company's burgeoning community outreach program, a program Genevieve herself had championed. Evelyn often visited Genevieve's office, not just for work-related matters, but to share updates on her family, her studies, and her burgeoning dreams. Their bond, forged in the crucible of adversity, deepened into a genuine intergenerational friendship, a quiet testament to shared values. Blaine Montgomery, on the other hand, vanished from the corporate world, utterly erased from its polished corridors, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms behind closed doors. His name became a symbol of ambition unchecked, a stark reminder that ruthlessness, while sometimes yielding short-term gains, ultimately leads to ruin, to isolation. His career, his reputation, his very standing in society had been utterly decimated, leaving him with nothing but the bitter taste of his own hubris, his own colossal miscalculation. Genevieve Sterling often reflected on the journey she had undertaken. She had seen the very worst of human nature, the greed and the callousness that could infest even the most noble of institutions, corrupting them from within. But she had also witnessed the enduring power of simple human kindness, flickering like a resilient flame in the darkest of corners, a quiet act performed without thought of reward. It was Evelyn's small, unassuming acts of compassion, performed with no expectation of personal gain, that had solidified Genevieve's resolve and ultimately guided her hand in the company's dramatic reshaping. The experience reaffirmed a timeless truth for Genevieve. True character is not revealed in the glare of success, in the moments of triumph and accolades, but in the quiet shadows of adversity. It is in the moments when no one is watching, when there is no apparent gain, that the deepest facets of a person's soul are exposed. And while greed and ambition may rise to the surface, appearing dominant and powerful, it is kindness, given freely and without calculation, that holds the power to illuminate the path forward, proving that genuine goodness, like a well-tended thread, will always weave its own magnificent reward. If Genevieve Sterling's remarkable story of courage, kindness, and corporate redemption resonated with you, then you're in the right place. We bring you powerful, real-life inspired narratives every week, highlighting the triumphs of the human spirit and the timeless lessons that truly matter. Don't miss out on more incredible stories like this one. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you're always the first to know when a new video drops. And we want to hear from you. What was the most impactful moment for you in Genevieve's journey? Have you ever witnessed an act of kindness that changed someone's life? Or perhaps even your own? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments section below. We love reading your insights and connecting with our amazing community.